Hello viewers, my name is Susan Asimwe, a midwife and a women's health specialist. Today I'm here to talk about sexual and gender-based violence. I know the word sex and gender, people have always interchanged them or used them concurrently. It's like one is a synonymous to the other. But in general, when someone talks about sex, this is referring to the biological differences, like between male, female, girl, boy. That's the genetics and the genitalia parts. But here, when we talk about the genetics, we are looking at male having the 46 chromosomes of the X and Y, and then the female having the 46 of the XX. So, and when we talk about gender, this is a little bit difficult to define. However, we are looking at gender as the role of the male and the female in a society, and that is what usually we call the gender role. And we are looking at even an individual's concept. What do you think you are? Some people may think they are female, other people may think they are male. So within you, that gender identity is the gender that we refer to. So today we are going to talk about we are going to understand the gender-based violence, and we are going to look at the categories of gender-based violence. However, we shall discuss more in details the sexual violence. We shall look at the forms of the sexual violence so that you're able to know when they say sexual violence, is it just about sex, someone penetrating your private parts or something? So here we're going to look at what are the forms of sexual violence. We shall also look at those factors that put women or make women more vulnerable to sexual violence, and also look at the consequences of sexual violence, especially to women and girl child. And more lastly, we are going to discuss the aftercare. What is the care that you are supposed to receive after the sexual violence? So, sexual and gender-based violence is a gross violation of human rights, and we all know that. It affects everyone, male, female, women, men, globally. However, today we are going to focus more on women and girl child, which is more part of my interest, but it doesn't mean that male are not suffering the sexual violence. It is also a serious health problem, and it has much of the negative consequences, especially on the side of women's health and their well-being. And so, to the children, households, and communities at large. Here we look at sexual gender-based violence. This is considered to be any harmful acts directed against an individual or a group. And sexual gender-based violence can actually be understood as an expression of masculinity. When you find a man actually wants to show his more of male energy, the factor, the roles, like everything about his masculine. Although not all men are actually violent, but we look at men directing violence to women. And why? Because they are women. So it is just the state of inequality between the genders. And here are the categories of gender-based violence, and we shall talk more about sexual violence, but there is also physical violence. Here is when someone slaps you, when someone pushes you or beats you. And we have seen most of these things happen within our communities. And now that we are actually in the lockdown, we want our people to understand these forms of violence so that they are able to know their rights, stand for themselves, and see even how they can prevent themselves from such kinds of violence. Then there is this emotional violence. Emotional violence cannot be separated from the physical violence, because it is going to come in usually secondary to the physical violence. So the traumatic incidents that happens of someone pushing you is going to traumatize you. The verbal abuses that you receive, all that is emotional violence. Then we have economic violence. This is denial of resources. We have seen in our communities where women work and men take control of their resources. Why? This is a question that we cannot answer here, but everyone may be in our heads we can answer why men control the finances of women. But this is also denial of resources. This is economic purely economic violence. So you don't have to let yourself be violated of your economic on your economic part. We have seen women go to the gardens dig, and then at the time of selling the product, it's the husband that is selling and receiving the money. But yet it's the woman who has worked, and she cannot stand up for herself even if she wanted. This is typical economic violence. Then we have harmful traditional practices. These are so common in our areas. Forced marriages. Some of these, we have seen girls be forced to get married at an earlier age, at any time that the parent would wish that she gets married. This is a harmful tradition, and it's also a form of sexual and gender-based violence. We have looked at some practices like female genital mutilation. So within this is where they have gotten female or girl child and they are circumcised. They cut their labia minoras, to those who know. So this is really part of a harmful tradition, and it's not a good practice. It is violation of human rights. So here we are going to pay more attention onto the sexual violence. So sexual violence is a form of gender-based violence, like we have seen, and it encompasses any sexual act, any attempt to obtain sex. Like, even if he didn't obtain sex, yes, but there was an attempt. That is sexual violence. Unwanted sexual comments. We have seen that every time you're moving, some people are actually throwing sexual comments onto you. You pass some stage where there are lots of guys and they are telling you this and this and this about sex. So that is sexual violence. Then we have also looked at obtaining sex using coercion. This coercion is like really so broad, or not only like force, but you can have someone, yes, it can be physical force, but it can also involve psychological intimidation. You look at someone, tell you, if you don't do this, you're not going to get a job. If you don't give me sex, you're going to lose your job. So this is kind of blackmail that is going to rule you into sex, and that is sex violence. And we should understand some of these terms so that you know when you are being sexually abused. So, and this is actually a common practice. We find that 1 in 4 women may experience this sex violence by actually an intimate partner. This does not actually sex violence does not give the right to your husband and to abuse you sexually, even when you have not consented to it. So we see that 1 in 4 women actually will experience the sexual violence by an intimate partner. And then we have like 1 in 3 of the girls and adolescents reporting that their first time sexual encounter was by force, and that is also sexual violence. But we can also agree that while sexual violence can be directed to women, it is also possible that it can be directed to men. But here we are going to focus so much on the women and the girl child. So here we are looking at the forms of sexual violence. We have talked about rape. We have looked at the intimate partner sexual violence. Yes, he is your husband, but he can also rape you in cases where you have not agreed to that, or where you have misunderstandings and you think it is not going to happen and it happens. And here we have seen them mostly in HIV discordant couples. The husband realizes that he's actually HIV positive, and he comes back home and has to harass you sexually until he's sure that you have seroconverted. Other people, you will find that they have to use rape in any way to get whatever they want to get. This can happen in marriage or in other people who are in distant relationships. You can find that it can be a stranger. Yes, you don't know this person, and this person has found you on the way or somewhere and has raped you. Or it can actually be by the person that you know. And we have seen that most of the rape cases that happen, they happen with a person who is not a stranger to the girl child or to the women. Then the next is sexual abuse to children, and especially people with disabilities. We have seen most women who are disabled become pregnant, and they don't have support. And yes, they might know that it is the other person, but they may not even tell the public that it is the other person. But they were raped because of their incapabilities. Then forced contraception. We have cases, yes, we want people to use contraceptives. Maybe your husband doesn't want you to become pregnant anymore. Maybe he thinks you've gotten enough children. But for you, within you, you think you should have more children. And so they force you to use any kind of contraception that is going to prevent you from getting pregnant. That is a form of sexual violation. Then forced abortions. You have become pregnant, you think you should keep your pregnancy, but your parents think you're still young and you should stay in school. So if they force you to abort, this is also another form of sexual violation. Then we have forced prostitution. Young girls right now, they are going to be employed into very many occupations once this quarantine maybe is over. You'll find that girls are going to work in bars and other recreational places. And you'll find that, yes, you go as a waitress, but at a certain time, you're supposed to serve the customer. And so they force you to practice prostitution. And this is another form of sexual violence. And then we have trafficking. This is something that has been happening, though it has not come into light. Girls are going to be trafficked from Uganda. They are taken to Dubai. They tell you're going to do this, but when you reach there, they are actually abusing you sexually. You will find, we have seen lots of videos that have shown where girls have gone to other outside countries and they have been used as sexual objects. Then we have forced circumcisions. Yes, circumcision could be good, but you don't have to force someone to circumcise. If you force this person to circumcise, you're violating his sexual rights. Then castration. Castration is when they cut off your testicles as male. So if this ever happens, this is violation of your sexual rights, and actually they should be sued for that. Then forced nudity. You'll find you are working somewhere, but they are forced to take your photos when you're naked. This is violation. Unwanted sexual advances and sexual harassments. So you'll find you're on a job, instead you're getting 500,000, but your boss is giving you 700,000. Why? Maybe he wants you to, he is ruling you into violating you sexually. You find all the workshops, you're the one to go. Everywhere he's choosing you, and for you maybe you may not know the thing behind that, but he might use you for that. He knows that you're going to get all the benefits or all the advances, so he gives you those offers in return to sex. This is very dangerous, especially to the girls who have just started working, especially now that unemployment is so high and we have to face the reality of unemployment and deal with it. So by the time you accept the little offer they have given you, and you find you have to be abused sexually. This is very bad, and I think the girl child should understand these factors and look on how they can protect themselves from being violated sexually. And especially now that we are in these days at home, it's important that you note most of these forms and you get to know that this is taking me into violation. This person is tending to violate my rights sexually. So at this moment, we are going to take a break. And when we come back, we shall be looking at factors increasing women's vulnerability to sexual violence. Hello viewers, welcome back from the brief break that we had. And now we are going to look at the factors increasing the women's vulnerability to sexual violence. The previous session, we looked at the forms of sexual violence, and now we are continuing from there. So factors increasing women's vulnerability to sexual violence. One, we have age. So here we look at young women are usually found to be more at risk of rape than the older women. So more likely that the young women are not able to either fight for themselves. The young girls are going to be ruined into rape or anything by the mere fact of that they cannot make their own decisions. They will be lied to by this, and they cannot think critically through some issues. Someone can actually lie to you because you're still immature, you're very young. Let's go to my house for a cup of coffee, and you will think it's just a cup of coffee. And by the time you get there, they will be raped. Children will be lied to. Let me buy for you a soda, you know. or your parent will actually send you to a friend's house, like go and pick this. But the fact that you are young, this person can easily lure you into sexual violence. So age is a very big factor, and we should look after our young ladies and children to make sure that they are not lured into sexual violence, especially sending them into places that might increase their vulnerability to sexual violence. Then we have alcohol and drug consumption. This is a very big issue, especially here in Uganda and in our communities. We find that once girls are abusing alcohol or using any form of drugs like they are doing, they may not have the capacity to stand and defend themselves. So you will find that consuming alcohol will make it more difficult for the woman to defend herself. If you are drunk and you're on the road, how will you defend yourself from a stranger who is coming in to rape you? We have looked at every bar open, yes, at night. We have our precious campus girls. So you find at night you go out with a gang of girls, but because you get drunk, maybe your colleagues might not even remember to take care of you, and so you remain behind. And whoever man will help you from there, they will actually abuse them sexually, and you find that they are not even able to open up because most would not want to say that as raped. So with that, they are going to suffer the consequences of sexual violence. So here it is very important, especially for a girl child, when to go out, like go with your friends, go with the people, yes, that you trust, but also limit the amount of alcohol consumption and other drugs that you are going to take, especially when you realize that the environment you're in might not be so safe for you. Then we have, this is quite hard, that women who have been previously raped are actually at an increased risk of being raped again. So this can stem from the fact that maybe the environment where they are living. If you are raped before and maybe around there, it means that also the socioeconomic status of the community where this person is could be quite low. And what happens there? People are using drugs, people are idle, and all other activities. So once they are abusing drugs, they may actually abuse you sexually. But also, it actually is seen that even in adulthood, the women who were abused while they were young, there are also high risks that they're also going to be abused when they are in adulthood. This could be that maybe in adulthood, these women are, yes, as abused sexually, so I no longer have something to lose. So even if I'm abused again, so you will find these are the people who are like sex workers. But sex workers are actually going to be more abused than any other part. You'll go in for rather sex, for yes, maybe you're paid to only do sex for maybe whatever means they pay for and this and that, but it might be all prolonged, or it might be even other forms of sex. People are forcing you into oral sex, people are forcing you into anal sex, and yet you thought it was going to be the normal sex that we regard normal. Then we have having multiple partners. We have looked at women dating or young girls dating one person, the other, and you find that you are actually exposed to very many men. You have one to buy maybe lipstick, you have the other to give you clothes, and you have the other that you love most. Like those are the things that are actually happening within the young girls. And so what happens is that this one is not intended for sex, but at a certain point, you are actually forced to do what? To have sex with this person. Or this person is going to force you into sex because you have been receiving so much from him. And all he thinks that he's going to get in return is sex. So having many sexual partners puts young ladies at a very high risk of sexual violence. Another factor that is actually also complex is education level. It's true that low education level is really consistent with perpetrating and also those experiencing the sexual violence. You will find that men who have actually not gone to school to a certain level, because studies have showed and literature shows that boys who have not gone to above a secondary school level are the perpetrators. And you'll find that also girls who did not go to school are the victims. So this is so much into the educational levels. So this happens to the girls because they don't know that this is their right. Once you even touch me, once you throw the sex comments on me, once you force me into the act, only forcing me into the act is sexual violence. So they are going to be victims like that. But we also have studies that have shown that there is actually an increased risk of sexual violence as much as physical violence by an intimate partner, especially when the woman is more educated. And the author thought that this could be because that when a woman gets more educated, this woman is emancipated and they actually know their rights. So they will not allow to be abused. So men are actually like competing with them. You will not say yes and then he says no. You will not say no and then he says yes. So in the end, you find that there is actually violence also among women who have gone to school, who are educated. Then another important factor is poverty. So poverty is really a very big factor that puts a woman at an increased risk for sexual violence. So you will find that actually girls and women, they are forced to do certain jobs which they wouldn't want to do. Like forcing them to, not actually forcing them, they will go to practice nudity because they have to be paid for they need the money to run their everyday activities. We have girls who are doing like house chores, like the housemaids. You will go there because you're looking actually for the money, but actually your boss is abusing you sexually. We have people who would move to other countries, like we have seen. All of those factors are as a result of poverty because they are trying to look for the income, how they have to sustain themselves, and they end up being abused sexually. Then we are going to look at some of the consequences that come as a result of sexual violence. So this is definitely in line with women and girl child. And some of these factors are going to be pregnancy and gynecological related. Things to deal, what are those consequences that will come as a result of sexual violence? So in the area of pregnancy and gynecological areas, this is the health, the well-being of the woman. So sexual violence really impacts this area so greatly. One of the consequences is pregnancy itself. So you'll find as a result of sexual violence, you have become pregnant. This is the hardest time for every woman that is raped, and then you have to carry this pregnancy for the 9 months. You have to go through labor and then see this child that you have gotten as a result of rape. So this is a very complicated time for the woman, and also the health workers. Once you realize that this is a mother that is pregnant and as a result of rape, this needs more of the psychological care, the physical support, the social support, like in every aspect of this woman's life, because this is actually really complicated. Maybe this woman didn't even know that after rape, I need certain kind of care to prevent the pregnancy, to prevent myself from other infections. And so she carries on the pregnancy. And she would actually realize that she's pregnant when the pregnancy is too big, that we do not advise to be terminated. So this is a little bit complicated for the woman, and it's important that she gets support from the community, from the health workers, and everyone around her. Then we have experiences of coerced sex at an early age. This will reduce the woman's ability to see her sexuality as something which she has control on. Like if you have been abused before, so they are going to lose the interest within their sexual life. Actually, you find that these are the girls that are selling off themselves. These are the girls that have to stand and give in sex at any cost because they no longer value something about sex, because they feel they even don't have control over their sexuality. So this is actually a consequence of sexual violence. Then people can also end up with some kind of trauma. A lady is going to come and has vaginal bleeding. So this is trauma, can traumatize all the reproductive area, especially if they are still young, and you find that the reproductive system is also compromised, and as a result of sexual violence. Then infections. Women are going to get any kind of infections We don't know his serostatus. Possibly you can get HIV. You don't know, okay, if he doesn't have HIV, then he has other sexually transmitted diseases like the trichomonas and chlamydia, which are actually very bad infections. So this is actually also as a result of sexual violence. They can get genital irritations, like every time you touch this girl, like it is really irritating, like they even get kind of reactions into their genitalia as a result of sexual violence. They can even get the psychological pain. And you find this is the girl who never wants actually to have sex at any time in point, because she was actually traumatized. She thinks every time she's going to get to have sex, it's going to be all about pain. But also physical pain can actually be there during intercourse. Then they can also end up with chronic pelvic pain, and this usually comes as a result of the infections that they had. Either they were not prevented or they were not treated very well. So this chronic pelvic pain can come, and it is also kind of pain that is hard to treat, and it's kind of pain that is real. So it is important that once you go through all these experiences, it's important that you go to the healthcare facility where they can manage some of these consequences so that you don't get into complications. Then you can also end up with urinary tract infections. Some of them, the sex is going to be definitely very rough. They are going to traumatize the urethra, and so you find this woman is ending up with some kind of urinary tract infections. We talked about sexually transmitted diseases and talked about HIV and its consequences. We also have mental health consequences. We have seen girls in depression. We have seen people who actually have post-traumatic stress disorders. Some of these mental health things can be immediate, can be short-term, and others can actually be long-term. You could have been raped while you were 18, but you're actually suffering the consequences of rape when you're 30 and like you're getting married. That's when you have the exact post-traumatic disorder within your head, and this is really very bad. In some societies, we have seen social ostracization. This is like social banishment. So, however, in most of the parts of the country, we see that if you're raped and you get to report the case, you might actually be banished from the area. So this is a consequence for the woman, that you might be banished. What do they, in most societies, you will find that if a girl is raped, this girl is going to be forced to get married to the rapist. Why? Because the family is trying to keep its image, and they're also trying to keep the image of the girl. But at this point, it is not actually helping the girl. This is more frustrating. It is going to send her into depression and more of the post-traumatic stress disorders. We have seen that a girl on a certain community is going to be raped, and actually the parents are going to be paid off. And then the case is over, and the girl doesn't have to report this to the police. This is also going to send them into other mental health disorders. So at this point, we are going to go for a short break, and when we come back, we are going to talk about the aftercare. What am I supposed to do when I am raped? And you have to know some of these things so that you're able to know exactly which care do I need, which care must I receive in order to go through the whole experience of sex violation. Thank you so much. Welcome back from the break. And while in the break, a question came in: how do we get our girls to open up? This is another area that is really important, because we have very many incidences actually to end up with these consequences. It means that the girl did not open up at the right time she was supposed to open up. So what do you do? What do we do? How do we have to do it as parents to have our girls open up? First of all, I think we have to improve the relationship between the girl child and the mother, or the person who is really taking care of the girl. But we have seen that most of the sexual violence cases that happen are actually happen within the circles of the people that the girl is aware of, or the girl that knows, maybe the uncle, maybe the father, maybe a relative, or someone whom they are staying with. However, here we see that it is actually very hard for the girl to open up. However, girls, I want to tell you that speak out whenever something like this happens. Get this person that you trust. Let it be your mother, your father, a close friend. Open up to that person, because if we don't open up, we are going to end up with some of the consequences, some of the complications that are actually very hard to manage. Another thing that we have to do when this girl opens up to you, maybe you're the mother and she tells you that the uncle has raped her. This is really so hard information to take in. You will feel like you have to run to this person and strangle them or cut them into pieces, but you don't have to do that. This person, yes, you want to protect the image of the family, your image, the image of the girl, but you have to remain calm. You have to report, yes, this case to the police. And you have to make sure that you take this girl immediately to the health facility where she can receive the aftercare that we are going to look at. And in many circumstances, we have seen that you actually even report to the police, and the police in our villages will actually send you to settle things by the family. And this is where we have seen that some families are paid off. The rapist is going actually to pay off the family, and you end the cases. But the person who is being raped, you don't have to stay quiet. Make sure you speak out until someone hears your voice. So here we're going to look at once you've been raped, what is this aftercare that you would wish to receive, or what is this care that you're actually obliged to receive? So this aftercare is going to be really wholesome, and it's going to be in every aspect. Let it be physical, let it be emotional, psychological, like every part of your body. And in this part, it is important that we help whoever is next to this victim, help them to realize that they are actually not, they don't have to feel guilty, because they are going to be actually so much full of guilt, and maybe they think this happened because they contributed to this and the other, or they have contributed to the actions that happened. But it's important that we calm them down and let them know that actually that the person who has to be guilty is the person who has done the case, the person who has violated them, but not them themselves. So here, when you reach the facility, we expect treatment of physical injuries. It's possible that they are going to go into a certain kind of fight before the person is violated. So this girl might present with kind of physical injuries. So in case this person is bleeding and you are home, it's important that you apply something or some pressure onto that area and it stops bleeding. If the bleeding is through the, it's important that you run to the nearest health facility where they can manage that physical injury. And then here we also have within the health facility, because some of this management, you might not do it at home. You have to run to the facility. So here we also have to prevent pregnancy, because we have looked at some of the consequences of sexual violence is pregnancy itself. So how do we prevent pregnancy? We have to give you some emergency contraception, emergency family planning method to make sure that you don't conceive, because conceiving the child for whom you also don't know the father, or out as a result of sexual violence, might be more traumatizing and might create more of the post-traumatic stress disorders. So it is important that you yourself, you make sure that you've been given an emergency contraception which is going to prevent you from becoming pregnant. Then also we have management of sexually transmitted diseases. So you'll find that still within the facility, we have to give you some antibiotics that are going to prevent some kind of infections, sexually transmitted diseases like the chlamydia, the trichomonas. Those are the most sexually transmitted diseases. And also we have to prevent HIV. We know that in Uganda the prevalence of HIV is actually very high. So you don't have to take this for granted. If the place where you have gone, they cannot provide what we call post-exposure prophylactic treatment, what we call PEP, it's important that they refer you to a facility where you can have PEP, and then you can be helped within the first 72 hours rather than waiting for the infection to progress and you end up with HIV. So there are very many other infections like hepatitis B. They can actually be sexually transmitted. So it's important, once you reach the facility, they can screen you for hepatitis. And after screening, if you don't have hepatitis, then they'll give you the immunization. And this will protect you from hepatitis B infection. Then the broad part is actually psychological support. We have seen that women or girls are going to go into depression. They might have post-traumatic stress disorders, and some of these actually mental health problems might be immediate, and others might be long term. So it's important that we go through these sessions at the beginning so that we don't have to wait for the problem to reach far where we cannot contain it. So here, counseling and social support. So some of the counseling sessions, yes, they can be individual. It's important to join the support groups if they are there, and some facilities have the support systems where they will join you into a group where you'll find girls who have been into a similar situation, and you get to share the experiences, the challenges, and they get to improve, to counsel you, and also feel like you can contain your own situation within your mind before you break down. Then social support back at home, the parents, the siblings, and people you're living with. These people have to be very supportive. If they are not supportive, like wherever you pass, this girl was raped, see the girl that was raped, this is very bad for the girl. So it is more important that you actually support her emotionally, support her physically, and make sure that she does not actually get to go through the kind of trauma from the population. Then another thing is to do the follow-up visits. So here your healthcare provider or your counselor is going to do those follow-up visits to make sure that you actually improve. Every maybe week you have to talk to her. Every after 3 months you might need to talk to her, because this is a problem that can actually be prolonged. This is a problem that might live within you for the rest of your life. Like, you don't get to forgive yourself, you don't get to understand why things are happening like they are happening, and you keep blaming yourself for all the violence that you have gone through. We have seen situations where the girl is raped and raped and raped and raped over and over again. So here, if we don't support these girls, they will not open up. They are going to continue living the life they are living, and it is going to be actually trauma for them. So here we have to teach our girls how to prevent themselves. How do we have to prevent ourselves from sexual violence? One, I would request, like every girl, right now we are in quarantine, we are at home, we have seen all the forms of sexual violence. Someone pointing at you, those bad touches, you know, report them. This is the beginning. Today he only touched your breast, but tomorrow he might rape you. So do not keep quiet, even on just attempts. And you think it is stopping there. It is not going to stop there. If it is the family member or someone who is close to you, it's important that you open up to someone and let them know that someone in the family is actually violating you sexually. But also, most important part is also change of behavior. Men actually, in some communities, they believe that men do not rape. They think that you provoked them to rape you. So you will find like no one is actually protecting you. All they will do is either they will force you to get married to that man because he has raped you, you provoked the man, or they will just leave you to die with your frustration. So it's important that we change our behavior. The drinking and the use of drugs, this is very bad, especially for a girl child. You will fail to defend yourself. You will be drunk, you will be drowsy, and you can't protect yourself. So if you don't change your behavior, it's more likely that you're going to be violated all the time. And maybe the code of dressing, and especially when you're at home and with the people, you know, big families. You're staying with your uncle, with your cousins, with everyone. And now we are even at home in this quarantine. It's important that we dress decently and we don't get to provoke the men. They say that we provoke them. But me, I don't believe definitely in provocation. I think it's also a behavior that comes up with the individuals. So also, it's important to learn self-defense. Self-defense, I know it's very hard for you to fight back, but you could push this person into some kind of negotiations. Maybe, can I go for a short call and come back? May I do something, you know? May I step out and come back? Can I pick something and give you? So in the way of distracting him, you might get a way of running away from danger. So it's important that you learn a little bit of negotiating skills, and it's also important that you get a little bit of ways that you can defend yourself. So to the women, young girls who have to go out to drink, and maybe after these sessions, or even people now drinking like from their areas, it's important that you get to know who is next to you. Whom are you drinking with? Get to know your campaign. Once you know people, your colleagues and people around you, you will either feel safe, or you will be able to realize that I cannot trust the people that are around me, especially if you're a girl child. So once you realize the people that you are actually with, the people that you're actually drinking with, then here you will get to understand whether you're safe or you're not safe. But if you only do things in any way, you might end up being sexually violated. Then also, like I'd said before, realize the good and the bad touches. So when someone holds your hand, how are they holding it? You know, if some things are actually showing that no, there might be something that is real, that is taking us into sexual violence. So the bad touches, realize the bad touches and get to avoid them immediately. If someone touches you and you think this is a bad touch, what happens next must be violence. So it's important that you realize those bad touches, either get away immediately or find a way of reporting such kind of bad touches. So most importantly is modifying our norms, beliefs, and in our communities that support sexual violence. Like before, we used to have the things that our mothers actually never got married when they were willingly. Go to fetch firewood and someone is going to carry you, and they bring you back when you're pregnant, and the family settle stuff. These are some of the beliefs and norms that we have in our cultures, and these are some of the things that are supporting the what? Supporting sexual violence. So if the law comes out and they put up structures that protect women against such acts, we have seen that where the girl is raped, and it's okay, the family can sort that out. If our girls can come to speak out and then come to see how to discourage such kind of norms and beliefs, then maybe we would help our girls not to be violated. So today we have looked at the categories of sexual and gender-based violence, and I hope we can remember them, like the emotional, the physical, and sexual that we based on so much. We looked at those factors that increase your vulnerability as a woman to be abused, and we have looked at some of the consequences and the aftercare. So with this kind of discussion, I hope we will all be able to realize when you're about to be violated, realize the things that put you at a risk of being violated, realize that I need to actually protect myself from being violated, and how do I do that? So I hope you can actually get something, especially in this lockdown. So this sexual violence is actually common and a serious public health problem, and very many people are being affected by the sexual violence throughout the world. It is, yes, driven by many factors, starting from the economic, the social, the culture, in every aspect, in every sphere, it's there. And yes, we agree that men are actually violated. They also have their consequences, which are actually bad. But today we have looked at the woman and the consequences, the health-related consequences that might come up as a result of sexual violence to the women. But remember, at the heart of sexual violence directed against women is gender inequality. So if we can try to see how can we make this gender equal, and then how can we empower our young girl child, how can we help them, educate them about some of these things, then it will be important that they don't get to be violated. So this is the end of the show. Thank you so much for staying with us. If we have any comment or any questions, you can direct them to our social media platforms, and we will be able to answer to you. Thank you so much.